Welcome to the American Printing House for the Blind's Connect Center's Success Story Series. I'm Joe Strecce. I'm a person who is totally blind. I happen to be wearing a Hawaiian type shirt that's black with blue palm leaves. I have long hair and a ponytail. I have a beard, and I'm sitting in my in office space that has, I think it's beach white, my wife says, the wall, and a white shelf as well behind me. That's about all I know. So welcome to this series. This will be for Career Connect and Family Connect. We just started this series recently, and we have captions available. The captions are being recorded at this moment. So you can always activate your captions. So I'm here today with Russell Schaefer from Walmart, and I would love to say, Russell, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you today. Always good to be with my friend Joe Strecce. I will start by saying that Joe covers the hair for both of us. Unlike Joe, I am clean shaven head and face. And just to give you a little bit of visual description, I've got on a light green button-up long sleeve polo shirt and sitting in my home office, which the walls I believe are called stone gray, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
So it's great to be here. As Joe said, I work for Walmart. I work today in Walmart's Office of Global Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion, and I am based in Bentonville, Arkansas.
Awesome. So Russell, I've known you for, I don't know how many years now, a while, and I was introduced to you through the Disability In organization and through their mentorship program. And so I know a little bit about you, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your education was like. And I know you also dealt with losing vision, and we lost vision in a similar way, but could you tell us a little bit about your educational path?
Yeah, totally, Joe. And your memory's spot on. I think we met, I think it will be 6 years ago. Next month, we're recording this, August 2020. I think we met at the Disability In conference in 2014. It was my first. I came in, sat down at a table in a session that you were leading a roundtable conversation with a bunch of students and recent grads with disabilities, and I was really impressed by your presence and the way in which you were leading that conversation and providing counsel and insight. And I was like, I got to get to know this guy, and here we are 6 years later, having a conversation like this, and I'm really grateful for your friendship and everything that I've learned from you throughout the years. Like you said, you and I share similar experience, similar journey. I, like you, lost my vision progressively as a result of retinitis pigmentosa. I was diagnosed when I was about 10 years old, and led to early on in high school and college, night blindness and some visual field loss. And so kind of through school, both high school and then on to college, my vision loss didn't necessarily affect me in the classroom, but it did affect me in terms of just transportation and some of those things. I was a commuter for a large part of my college experience. I was really involved in extracurriculars. I was the editor of the student newspaper my senior year. I acted in the drama department and did some other things that required me to be on campus after dark a lot of the time. And even though I drove at that time, I did not drive after dark. And I lived about 45 minutes away from campus. And so it definitely posed some challenges and some things. I had to get creative in terms of, finding a dorm room to crash on, or, I slept, more nights than I care to count on a very uncomfortable futon in the newspaper office. But more often than not, I was really fortunate to have a great support system. My father was really, really supportive of everything that I did, and really went out of his way to ensure that I had transportation when I needed to do things that were beyond the scope of what I was able to do with my vision loss at the time. He would wait hours in the car for me when I was finishing out a layout of the newspaper, or he'd wait when rehearsal went way beyond what it was supposed to in the drama department. And just really, really fortunate to have that type of parental support system. I certainly could have done the standard coursework day to day. As part of my college experience and education at the time with the vision that I had. But the added kind of wraparound things that really not only led to application of what I was learning, but also just the social dynamics of college. I couldn't have done without that support from my parents, and I'm incredibly grateful for that.
That's awesome, and I know your family's important to you, and I think I see that when I see you interact with your family right now. So I think we're lucky. I feel lucky to know you, because you've been a mentor to myself in many different ways, and a role model too. So your educational path's very impressive, and I know getting employment early on was important to you, and it probably influenced your path as well. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned before, I work at Walmart. I work at Walmart today in the Office of Global Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion, and I feel like I've worked most of my adult life for Walmart, and in a way I have. My very first job outside of my paper route that I started delivering newspapers when I was about 12 years old, about the same age my daughter is now, which sometimes makes me think she needs to get out and get a job. 12-year-old, I was out tossing newspapers, but before the school bus picked me up when I was her age. But my first job outside of that, started working as a cashier at a Walmart store in Northeast Ohio, where I grew up the summer before my senior year of high school. And I ended up working all the way through graduation, at a Walmart or a Sam's Club, in different roles as a cashier and layaway and electronics and other things. And as I mentioned before, I was really, really fortunate that I had the support system of my dad, who, when I'd have to work, at 11, 12 o'clock at night to close the store, that, he would be there waiting for me to pick me up and take me home. So, for me, early on, employment's always been important. I've always wanted to work. It's never been a matter of if for me. It's always been a matter of how or where. And so, when I graduated college, I finished up my degree in summer of 2001, and I graduated with a double major in business administration with a marketing concentration, and communication arts with a journalism and PR concentration. And there were several jobs that I was looking at that were really intriguing and interesting to me, and I felt like I had a couple of really great leads. Like I said, I finished my last class in August and was out on the job market. And then September 11th, 2001 happened, and it completely changed the world. Suddenly, here I was, a college graduate with no experience, finding myself in a job market, following the 9/11 terror attacks, where we didn't know what the world was going to look like, tomorrow, let alone today. And I suddenly found myself competing for entry-level jobs with people with 10, 12 years of experience who found themselves out of work. And so I ended up, ultimately taking a job that was, my first job out of college. Actually paid me less than the job I left, working as a sales floor associate at Sam's Club. I took a job that was, for all intents and purposes, an internship that paid me $8.50 an hour, doing, marketing communications, and fundraising for a small nonprofit. On the one hand, it was challenging, it was tough. I definitely had to live at home at that time. But I also got the opportunity to learn a lot because I had to do everything in that role. I was a one person operations, like I said, writing, doing graphic design, working with the media, working with other stakeholders. I got a lot of experience, and it's a time that was, while challenging, one that I'm incredibly grateful for. And as I think about that point in time in my own life and career journey nearly 20 years ago, I can't help but see the parallels in the world today as we are living through the COVID-19 pandemic, and the civil unrest that's a result of the murder of George Floyd and others, and the things that are going on in the world around racial inequity and the conversations taking place today. It's a really challenging time to be entering the job market and the workforce coming out of college for anyone, let alone somebody who is blind or with a disability. But if my experience, entering the workforce in a immediate aftermath of 9/11 is anything, it's not where you begin, it's where you end. And you might not end up, taking the job or starting somewhere where you thought you would, but those twists and turns, are the spice of life. It's that adventure, it's that uncertainty that kind of keeps things interesting and gives you the opportunity to do things and get experience that you might not have otherwise ever thought. And, the doors that close sometimes lead to the doors that open in the most remarkable ways. So I would say, even though now is a really uncertain, really challenging time, just try to take it each day as you can, and, realize that, inside every crisis is opportunity, and there might be opportunity for you to find something that, never would have been possible before.
Love that. I love that. We have very similar paths in a lot of ways. And I always remember that when we talk or speak, September 11th and all. And, I was in New Jersey, New York area for that, and just started an internship, and that was supposed to roll into a job, and that happened. And so our firm went from, kept just getting smaller and smaller. So I had to go to plan B.
Life is really uncertain sometimes. Just take it as it comes.
Yep, you're right. So that's very impressive, and you just kept moving and making things happen, and having support makes a difference. I know I had the support, and it sounds like you had some great support from your family. So I want to ask you a little bit we were speaking a little about employment, and I'm going to come back to that. What about learning some of the blindness skills? What are any experiences around as you learn whether orientation mobility, how to use the white cane, or technology?
Yeah, it's definitely been a process and a journey for me. As I mentioned earlier, I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa when I was about 10 years old. The doctors told me that I would go blind one day. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And they told me that it would probably happen in my 40s or my 50s. I'm in my early 40s now, but I've been legally blind for about 12 years or so, and I have little to no usable vision left. So the doctors were spot on in their diagnosis, but they were off a few decades on their timeline. And so I think for me, for lack of a better term, and we can get into this a little bit more later, Joe, if you want to, but early on, I never was in denial about the fact that I had retinitis pigmentosa, or that I would go blind one day, or that I was losing my vision. But I always thought, then Russell always thought that was future Russell's problem. And I just kind of pushed that down the road a little bit. And it's like, oh, I can see now, I'm just going to live life. And, by the time I get to my 40s or my 50s, I'll be established in life, and, I'll be able to, do whatever I need to do in order to be able to adapt being blind. And so that was my philosophy. And I tried really hard to, conceal my blindness because, this was the late 90s, early 2000s. The ADA had been signed in 1990, and we had protections under the law from the ADA, but it was still pretty early on, and I didn't really have any role models, so to speak, to look up to in the workplace who were blind or had significant disabilities. You and I, if we're not the first generation of people with significant disabilities in the workforce, we're probably close to that, or certainly one of the first post ADA generations to kind of come out of college and enter the workforce. So there just wasn't a whole lot of people to look up to, or people to say, this is how you do it. And so for me, the way I thought you should do it early on is to hide your disability. I saw the stigma, and I saw the way people were treated differently, and I didn't want that to be me. And so I worried about that, and I put off getting a cane, and I put off getting the training and the mobility and orientation skills that I needed, for fear of drawing more attention to the fact that I was going blind. Ultimately, that ended up being a really bad strategy. Because my vision loss came on a lot faster than I anticipated or the doctors predicted. Like I said, by my late 20s, I was legally blind, and I was in the early stages of my corporate career at Walmart, and I found myself not being able to see my screen anymore and not really knowing how to do anything about it, not having the skills to be able to adjust to that. And I started to struggle in my work, and my performance sagged. Fortunately, Walmart had a really good accommodations department, and I was able to get some tools and some training. Started out with Zoom text, screen magnification, got a little pocket closed circuit TV that I'd carry around to meetings to be able to, scan over a document, blow it up, change the contrast, things like that. And that worked for a few years until my vision, continued to deteriorate more and more. And then I needed to, get screen reading software. I needed to, shift from being, what I had always historically been as a visual learner to, becoming an auditory learner. And that's a really big pivot for somebody who, loses their vision, spontaneously later in life, or loses their vision progressively. When you, are accustomed to taking in everything visually, to shift to how do you then process things cognitively from an auditory perspective, and do that in the midst of, trying to be productive and do a job was really, really challenging. Same thing with orientation and mobility. Probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I started working with an O&M instructor who would come to the office. I'd take an hour or so, 1 or 2 days a week, and I'd go, walk around the office building with him, go outside, walk the streets around the office, and then, we'd take time on, other days and on the weekends, and, we'd go walk downtown, we'd walk around my neighborhood, we'd go walk around the mall, and I'd learn how to use a cane. And I realized that all of those things would have been much, much easier had I learned how to do them when I still had some sight left than, had I, wait, did what I ultimately did and wait until, I needed those skills. But I'm so grateful for assistive technology and accommodations, as well as O&M skills and using a white cane. They make my life so much easier. They make my ability to do my job independently, to get around independently, so much more seamless. And, if I could say to anybody, if you're losing your vision, you still have vision left, learn O&M now, learn Braille now, learn assistive technology now. It will make your life so much easier once you reach that point of vision loss, but it'll also make your learning all that much more seamless if you do it while you still got some vision. So, use me as the case what not to do. It's all worked out in the end for me, but certainly it could have been a lot more smooth if I would have, not been so rigid and resistant to change and to learning earlier on in my life.
That's a great message, and I echo that too. Getting those skills changed my life, orientational mobility and technology and Braille. So I'm with you 100%. Get it while you get it as soon as you can, and learn it and live it. So yeah, I'm with you.